All right, now that story by Chris Tairu takes us to, of course, a break in terms of having a look at what is making the headlines, because right now it is a matter of a week in review. We have to review how the week has been for Kenyans and the entire country. A lot has made the headlines for the entire of this week. First, we had the ill-fated crash, and you've seen a lot of developing story. It's a developing story, of course, but we've had a lot of information from Addis Ababa, of course, with a team who made their way there, giving us the latest information. Of course, we've seen relatives of those people, of Kenyans who died during that ill-fated crash. They're not happy with how the Ethiopian government has been handling this issue. Then we've had matters corruption. Then now yesterday also, the court made a ruling when it comes to the interest rate, the capping that was by members of parliament. So members of parliament have until 1 year to review their decision, but as for now, for the next 1 year, we'll have to go back to paying the same interest that we used to pay when you take a loan from the bank. Now, and much more, and of course, matters week in review. Let's review the papers, what you've seen make the headlines for the better part of this weekend. Of course, with me in studio, I have, let me start with the lady, ladies first, gentlemen, Joy Brenda Mdivo, who's an advocate, seated next to Mark Bichachu is a communication consultant and, of course, also a political analyst. And, of course, seated next to Mark is none other than Fred Okango, Secretary General of the Third Way Alliance. Gentlemen and lady, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Karibuni.
Asante.
I hope so far your week has been good.
Pretty good, yes.
Despite the shocking details that have been making the headlines in this country. Okay. Now, let's begin with the Standard. I hope all of us have the Standard newspaper. Let's begin with that ill-fated crash. First, Kenyans feel like the ones who lost their family, because Kenya was the hardest hit. 32 Kenyans lost their lives. And they feel like the Ethiopian government has not done enough when it comes to giving them information, because yesterday we saw a lot of protest in Ethiopia to an extent that the Ethiopian government was telling them you cannot even carry soil from the site as a way of closure. And some of them are still trying to come to terms with the fact that they might not even come back home with the remains of their loved ones. I'll start with you, Joy.
It's very, very unfortunate, and your heart goes out to all the people who've lost their loved ones, because one, it's very terrible to be told that you have lost your loved one, but it's re-traumatizing when you find that as much as you know that, yes, they are gone, there is nothing to help you say goodbye. Because it is in the nature of Africans, I guess, modern day Africans, to at least have a ceremony to say goodbye to you. Other communities would be maybe not as affected, but African traditions demand that we give you a send-off.
Yeah.
And we've seen how in Kenya people go to great extents to give somebody a send-off. I wish everybody would just calm down and allow the process to go through, because if they want to give you the remains but they need to identify them, that's going to take time.
But they feel...
However, the Ethiopian government, on the other hand, should not be so rigid.
I was actually coming there, yes.
Yes, because we know that the regime is a strong-handed regime.
Yes.
They have a very heavy hand on their own citizens, but they should understand they're not dealing with their own Ethiopians who understand how heavy-handed they are. I mean, what is wrong if somebody finds a memento to take home? Because families are waiting here. How long are they going to keep all these people in Addis Ababa? People have got families waiting, jobs waiting. So it is only courtesy to say, okay, fine, usually maybe we are not very flexible, but in this incident, let's just do something to help our guests to feel more comfortable while we do our things the way we do our things, pole pole, taratibu. So I wish everybody in this scenario would just really calm down. But this is where our foreign affairs comes in, because the families right now are emotional, they are raw. But the diplomats can walk in and say, you know what? In this particular instance, the Kenya government demands of the Ethiopian government to treat our citizens as such.
All right. And Bichachu is actually coming to what Joy has said in terms of how the government has handled this, because it looks like not only the Kenyan government, but also other countries, the governments, the foreign affairs, ministers who are in charge of foreign affairs, of course, how they've handled this entire issue, because it looks like the victims have been left on their own, like handle it on your own. Yes, we know you've lost your loved ones, but handle it on your own, because the kind of scenes we witnessed yesterday in Ethiopia, it wasn't really welcoming, especially for people grieving their loved ones.
As Joy has said, Ethiopia is an interesting country. We must understand that Ethiopia is basically a police state. It is a state where the state is the one which determines even how you feel and how you think. And Ethiopia is notoriously cold towards the influence of other countries. Remember, it is the only African country to have resisted colonialism. So to them, the Ethiopian government is reacting in its own best interest, okay? In the sense that what if you give out a piece of soil and it has a piece of evidence that will then go say that the Ethiopian airline was culpable in some way? Because remember, Ethiopian Airlines is fully owned by the government of Ethiopia. So the reputation risk is not just to their airline, but to themselves. But to that end, we have to condole with the families and understand that as human beings, and I don't think it's just an African thing, I think it's for everybody, where you want to see, you need that closure, that moment when you see a casket and you see a loved one and you know this is really the end, the 5 stages of grief. Now, obviously, these guys are being denied closure. Now, the question becomes, what can the various foreign affairs ministries do? And what they can do is begin to negotiate with the Ethiopian government on an agreeable way of having closure. Because if indeed DNA is needed, it does not take 2 weeks to do those many DNA tests. That's one. And two, it is not going to be forever where Kenyans and other nationals are going to sit in hotels in Addis Ababa waiting for this result. So what our foreign affairs and those of other countries need to do, they need to start negotiating with Ethiopia on what is acceptable to them as a memento of closure for the families that are there.
But as an education expert, Bichache, I mean, it's not only the grieving families that are seeking for answers, but everyone globally is seeking for answers. Shouldn't we expect communication also from various governments? Because right now everyone is relying for information from the Ethiopian government.
But you see, the thing is, you are relying information from a state that notoriously does not give information. Okay, this is their modus operandi. Everything is a secret. If State House, the Prime Minister's office procures sweets in Ethiopia, you will not see that in the papers. Let's just be clear. So the thing is, we are expecting a report from the Ethiopians. That's not going to be forthcoming because they are going to protect their airline by hook or by crook. And number two, they're even going to protect it more from the Kenyans, because Kenyans have the other biggest airport, the other biggest airline, they're the biggest threat. So there's that protection. And then two, Boeing also has an interest in this thing because this is the second of their planes. So the communication that's going to come out there, I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but the state of Ethiopia and how they handle these things, I don't think there's going to be much information.
All right, Fred, let me bring you into this conversation, because the fact that, I mean, we have media representatives there, like KTN, we sent our crew, this entire Standard Group sent our crew there. And the information we're getting from them yesterday is that even the media were told to delete some of the recordings that were not even allowed to record. And even the saddest thing is that relatives are not even allowed to talk to the media.
First of all, I'm one of the individuals who are directly affected. I lost my aunt in that ill-fated plane. But let's look at how this information came out before we go to the media. The first information the media got from the Twitter handle of the Prime Ministers. That one tells you alone how they operate, as my colleagues have said. This is a state that believes that government is everything and everything is government.
Okay, let me just cut you short as we try to sort out your mic for a short time. But let me go back to you, to Joy. I mean, how the media has the Kenyan media, actually both local and international media, how they've covered this situation, and whether what the Ethiopian government is doing is actually right. Because you're all relying on our team that is there. And yesterday we waited for them to send us something. But sadly, the only thing we got is what has been put on our print, that's the Standard newspaper. But for TV, it was very hard. Because you're told delete, you cannot record. Relatives don't even talk to the media.
In fact, I think on another media house, the only footage they had was somebody's amateur video.
Exactly.
Snuck on a mobile phone. And that tells you the level of control. I have friends who've worked in Ethiopia for years. And even things like WhatsApp or just getting online to check your Facebook status, is ridiculousness. It's very, very difficult. The government has a very tight hold of the information. So it's one of the situations where their entire culture is shrouded in control. And so with us, we are spoiled because, I mean, in Kenya,
you get information
anyhow,
and
even
anywhere.
it's still a rumor. It's not even confirmed. Or rumors are, Bichachi is dead. Then Bichachi has to go on Twitter and say, no, actually, I'm still alive.
I'm still alive.
Oh, it was not Bichachi, it was Bichachi in Bungoma. It wasn't this one, it was another one. We are I think we are spoiled with too much information. And they, on the other hand, have such little information that the government there is, think about if you were in China or you were in North Korea, you'd be under the same sort of sanctions in terms of this is the much you can release, this is the much you can release. So even though you're an accredited press person, unless they have sanctioned what you can release, your presence there is, you're basically a flower girl. What you can do is eyewitness account. Because you are there as a correspondent, you can pen a story. And maybe that challenges the journalists to not rely too much on the visuals, but to go back to the good old storytelling. Tell us what you see, what you think, what you feel, what you smell, so that the Kenyans can also get an idea of what is going on in Ethiopia. But over and above that, maybe this is also a chance for Ethiopia to look at how they can reform and restyle themselves. Because you can only be so inward looking for so long. In this global economy, you want to compete on a global platform. Something like how they handle the information and this post-accident era would be more harmful than the accident itself.
Okay.
Because quite frankly, nobody really blames an airline, especially when it's clear that it is the aircrafts that have a problem. As Mark called it what? It's a communication exposure.
Yeah.
For them, it's much less than if they handle the PR later badly. Because if they handle the PR later badly, it's going to affect them a lot worse.
All right.
Maybe lesson learned for Ethiopian government.
All right, let me come back to you, Fred, and first allow me to send my condolences to you and your family for the loss of your loved one. And I mean, you're also responding to what Joy is saying, my question about how the press has been handled. I mean, it looks like the Ethiopian government is out for its own interest, if I may say that, at the expense of the safety of people who might be using their airlines again, and of course for the safety of, I mean also for the emotional concern at the expense of the relatives.
First of all, I was talking about the way information was coming to the world. This was a tweet from the Prime Minister, and at that time is when the media picked it. But something interesting is that there were no real photos for the first few hours, real photos, because if such a thing happens, what the world expects is, where is the video, where is the photo? Particularly the photo, they want to see the photo of the crash. It was not forthcoming, and that was a bit worrying. By the time the government was getting to the family members, information was still not coming as forth. And even when they were being sent, I think the last batch was sent yesterday evening to Addis. When they got there, it's a bit chaotic, and then the media now reports that they are not able to find the bodies. Actually, there are no bodies because all these things were scattered. But the most important thing is how the foreign affairs ministries from various countries have interacted with the government of Ethiopia. Every country, in a way, has failed its citizenship. Because you see, these people ought to have been prepared. The family ought to have been prepared so that when they go there, they know what to expect. Most of these families were kept in hotels for a very long time, and the communication is delaying. When you ask questions, you're told just wait. You see, at that moment, when you are grieved, I mean, you get agitated so fast, and therefore, chances are very high that you will not agree on anything. Now, let's look at what we expect as a people of Kenya. We lost the majority in that flight. And that means that us as a country, we are more aggrieved. Because you see, today, in every family that lost their loved ones, they are having expectations. That expectations is from the government or from Ethiopian airline. We would have expected that today we are told that it is indeed you are not going to get the body, but these are the procedures. And by the way, we need to start talking about now compensations, because under the what's called the Montreal Treaty, Montreal Treaty is that every flight, if you are involved in such an accident and it is found later that, you know, you are on a fault, or the manufacturer was on a fault, then you must be paid. And we are talking of money in tunes of $170,000. So those are the issues that the government should now starting to talk about.
But Okango, I think at this point, that would be the last thing in the mind of
I don't think
so many. Because, I mean, if you look at what is happening in Addis Ababa, that is the last thing in the minds of some of the relatives.
When you hear a flight accident, or aeroplane accident for that matter, chances are very high that the survivors are nil. That is expected.
Yeah.
But that information, how you pass it to the affected, matters a lot.
Okay.
And again, if you are driving your car and you get involved in an accident, the car is insured, the other car is insured. What is the expected? The expected is that there are compensations, either way, whoever was on the wrong. That is what we need to start talking about.
Okay.
This is life, and we say life is more important. The Ethiopian government should now communicate to various countries and say, look, you lost your citizens, it is our fault. Look at how the other countries have grounded the Boeings. They have grounded because of fear. And that is a risk, as he said, to the manufacturer. Because this thing is not going to be marketable anymore.
All right.